Okay, small groups, so you want to know about group rules and group norms, why you have them, and what the differences might be. So the first thing is you want to have rules and norms. These are the expectations. There's the standards of behavior for your group. So you need to set these up in the first couple weeks. You might come back and revise them or revisit them if they are or aren't working, but you definitely want to set these up in the first couple weeks. So rules are explicit standards of behavior about how the group is going to operate. You have an expectation, you wrote it down. That's what makes it a rule, was that it was clearly stated and everybody agrees to follow them. So it might, like in my workplace, a group rule is we always have a meeting the Tuesday afternoon before the semester starts. We actually have one on Tuesday and then we have one again on Wednesday afternoon. That's a rule. You know that's going to happen every single semester. You better show up. You will be in trouble if you don't show up, which never happens. Everybody always shows up because it's a rule, right? Another rule might be that, well, we'll see some other rules, but they're things that are written down. Whereas a norm is something that's implied. You didn't have to tell me to do it. I probably did it. Now, norms you can see how norms are sometimes great, but then if we're not mindful of them, norms can get out of control. It might be that you tolerate a behavior that you shouldn't be tolerating. So it's an implied standard of behavior, and they typically develop over time, and they're going to be a lot different from group to group. So I want to be very careful with the rules that I set up for my group for the right here in the first few weeks of class, and then I'm going to revisit them. And in terms of norms, something that's going to develop over time, I want to be thoughtful in that. And if a norm starts to become a problem, I want to correct for that when it does. We have to talk about it. So some examples of rules are things like being on time to group meetings. And then I would also establish what it means. Where I work, if you are 2 minutes late, that is definitely you're late to the meeting. In other places, you might have more leeway about how long, about what it means to be late to a meeting. But typically, there's definitely a rule in most groups you need to be on time. Another rule might be to let people finish talking before you talk. You would write that down. If you ever go to an academic senate meeting, that is a rule. You cannot talk over somebody, and you will get shut down if you talk over somebody. Another rule that you could write down is to attack the problem, not the person. That means you don't talk about the personal stuff. That means you're focusing on the problem at hand that's probably being talked about in the meeting. Another rule that might be really good for your types of group is say, okay, we're going to check in with the group at least twice a week or at least once a week, and define what group check-in means. Does it mean a text message? Does it mean an email? Does it mean video conference? It's up to you, but you need to decide that. Another group rule that's pretty common is phone use. Like if I'm in a meeting, I am not on my phone. Okay, and I'll give you I'll elaborate on that when we talk about rules or norms here in a second. And also another one could be decision making by consensus. So that means that the group makes the decision based on what the majority of the group members want, and you actually try to work your way towards everybody agrees. That is a rule in my work group, in my department, that we all agree. And oftentimes somebody will even say, this is my opinion, but if the group wants to do in another way, I'm totally okay with that. That's that person's way of saying, I want to reach consensus. I'm here with you. I'm just offering a different point of view. So it's actually a concrete rule in my group that we make decisions based on consensus. So in your group, you're going to pick things that apply to you. And some of these things are going to apply to you. Like you should make a rule about phone use, and it should be explicit and clear. Is there no phone use? Is it emergencies only? Is it you could send that one text message? Is it there's no rule? Definitely should have parameters. Don't do that last one. There should be parameters on your phone use or it will get out of control. And every single time, okay, I've taught a lot of small group, over 100 sections, and every single time a group says, okay, you can use your phone whenever they want, they always rewrite that rule by week 8 because it never goes well. You need to have some kind of guidelines about your phone use. Now, norms are things that emerge over time. Typically, they're not things that you talked about, but they're things that you all got okay with. And sometimes they're positive, working for the group, and sometimes they might not be. So let's talk about it. One example, this one could probably be positive: bringing food to a group meeting. That will happen in a lot of groups. This is an informal norm in my department. Oftentimes we bring snacks to share. Sometimes we'll have, if it's a night meeting, we'll have dinner together. You know, it's a good way to bond, but there's no rule about that. It's just a thing that seems to happen almost all the time. In my department, the 5-minute grace period for tardiness would not be a norm. That would not be tolerated. If somebody was continually 5 to 10 minutes late, we'd have to have a conversation about that. But in other groups, there might be a norm where that's okay. The group has to decide. 5 minutes really isn't that long in a lot of situations, but you are, in the workplace, that 5 minutes means a lot. So it's really up to the group. Another norm, something probably didn't get written down, but hopefully everyone does, is to just avoid inappropriate humor, like racist humor, sexist jokes. That's inappropriate. Most people don't want to be around that, or even avoiding the overuse of sarcasm, especially around people you don't know. That could be a norm. You never wrote it down. Nobody ever told you you needed to do that, but you kind of came to a collective agreement about it anyway. A really common one that I think is so relatable is that, okay, you say, I'm certainly not going to be on my phone the entire time, but it's okay if I check my text messages. Did your significant other text you about what you're having for dinner, which is the thing that happens in my department. And it's like, you get that one text message you get to send in a 3-hour meeting. But if you were on your phone a whole bunch, so that's within the norm, right? One text message is okay, or if there was an emergency, you could go deal with that. But if you were on your phone the entire time or scrolling through Facebook, that's not going to be tolerated, and we're going to have a conversation about it. But you could see how, if left unchecked in some work groups, I'm going to have too much phone use and I'm never going to get anything done. So that could become a norm that would be bad, and we would need to talk about it. Another one that just came to my mind is bathroom use. There's a good time to go to the bathroom and not, but most groups are pretty tolerant if somebody's like, hey, I really need to go to the bathroom, so this has been a 3-hour meeting, I'll be back in a couple minutes. And oftentimes actually a group will just take a whole break. That's what my group does. If one person has to go to the bathroom, then honestly we just all take a short break, and half the group ends up going to the bathroom anyway. So that's a norm. It's totally okay in my group to be able to just say, hey, pause, I need to go to the bathroom. And that's probably pretty normal too. But I've been in other situations in the workplace where that wouldn't have been tolerated. You couldn't have just gotten up in the middle of a meeting to go. So it's something that you kind of, nobody ever told you that that's allowed, but something you come to a collective agreement on. And again, you want to be careful with norms, because most of the ones that I put here are pretty harmless and might even help the group, but you want to avoid establishing a group norm that isn't working. Like, a group norm can be that that one person just never talks. That's not a useful norm. You got to do something about that. If the group was off task a lot, that can become a norm, a habit, a pattern. You need to do something about that. So you always are revisiting both group rules and group norms to figure out if they're working for you and if you want to make any changes. And at the very beginning here, it's crucial that you set up some clear, explicit standards of behavior and then for rules, and then you go into it keeping your eye on norms as they progress. Like a norm could be that you ended up canceling a bunch of meetings. That's bad. That's going to hurt your group. So you have to reevaluate over time which ones are working, which ones do we want to keep doing, and which ones do we need to adjust.